What's going on? What's going on, everybody? It is Tuesday. That means it's time for that effing morning after show. We got a lot to talk about the MVP race. Of course, we got to talk about playoffs. Yeah, we do. And we got to talk about your championship rosters. Did you come in first? Did you fall a little short? We got a doozy for you as well, involving people on this show. Let's get into it. It's that effing morning after show here on the Fantasy Sports Corporation. What is going on, everybody? Got to bring in my co-host, Mr. Adam Hulse. Adam, I know you're excited, and I want you to brag, and we're going to get into that. But I want to key it up as the show goes on. So we will throw out a quick congratulations, and I promise we're going to talk about how you got there and how it all happened. I want you to brag a little bit, but I don't want you to go overboard. We got a lot of NFL to cover. We got playoffs to cover. Of course, we got our predictions to cover. It's going to be a great show. I'm excited about it. Happy New Year, my friend.
Happy New Year. It is a beautiful morning. It was a great week of fantasy football. It was a beautiful week for my Dallas Cowboys, who are now back in the driver's seat. I'm officially a fan of the Arizona Cardinals. That's it.
Yeah, you and a lot of other people, to be sure. That was a shocker. That was an absolute shock. It was a shocker because it actually happened. Because we talked about it on the show. If you watch across the Fantasy Sports Corporation, the plethora of shows that we have across this network, you saw multiple shows where people were talking about Arizona had a chance to win this against
Yep.
Philadelphia's worst against the pass, how bad they were against the perimeter, the fact that Arizona, could pass. Uh, Arizona had a chance to win this game. We weren't the first to say it. We weren't the only ones to say it. We probably said it the best, but it was said. The fact that it actually happened, that was the big surprise, I think.
Yeah, and I mean, look, Philly's defense is a major issue right now. They rank 31st right now in total defense. I mean, that is a big problem for a team going into the playoffs. And it's another thing we've talked about too. Even during that 5-game winning streak that they had, all of those wins, they were down by double digits at some point in those games and were able to come back and win. So this downfall of Philly has kind of been brewing for a while, and props to them for pulling out, all 5 of those games in a row. But if they lost a few of those games and didn't come back, like this Philly team would be like red alert right now.
Offense wins games, defense wins championships, and that means Philadelphia is in trouble come the playoffs. We're going to get into the playoffs. We're going to get that in the second part of the show. We want to talk about this week, but as you know, we always got to talk about our predictions. You guys know we predicted every team, every game for the entire season, what their records were going to be, who was going to be in the playoffs. We'll talk about the details of the playoffs next week. This week, we're going to talk about just how well we're doing, and honestly, it's pretty damn good. All right, we love the stats and all the numbers and stuff on this show. Welcome to the show. This week, I went 11-5. Adam went 8-8. Not his best week. He's still in the lead. Don't worry, we'll get into that. As far as the NFL goes, home team, and this is going to come up later, so pay attention to the stat. Home team 10-6 this week. All right, when we talk about the playoffs in the second part of the show, after we get through this week's games, this week's storylines, we don't go every game, this week's storylines, when we start talking about playoffs, remember the fact that the home team won 10 out of 6 games. And the home team has won the majority, or at least 500, every single week this season. I think there's only been one season where visitors came out ahead. Home team is now 146 to 109 versus visiting team. All right, this is going to come up later on, so pay attention to that. I am at 155 and 101. Now remember, this record is important because we predicted all these games before the season ever started. So this isn't a week by week we went through and picked it. This is the games, how we picked them before the season ever started. So I'm 105 and 101. Adam's 159 and 97. He's got a 4-game lead. That's also going to come up because Adam, with his 4-game lead, we have 6 games picked different next week. We're going to talk about that. There is a chance for me to take the win in this one. Oh, in the NFL, we had 40, count them, 40 pass touchdowns this week. We had 26 rush touchdowns, 7 defense special teams for a total. Add that up real quick. That comes out to 73. 73 touchdowns across the league. It was offense, Adam. Across the board, people showed up for week 17. Fantasy numbers went through the roof. It was a great week for fantasy. It was a great week to watch football. It was a great week to be a football fan.
Yeah, and like I don't know it off the top of my head. Maybe you have it, but this has to be the most touchdowns in a week this season, right? Like 70, whatever it is. I mean, that's a lot. Usually, it's more in like the 50s, maybe the low 60s. Seems to be kind of the average. Like I said, like I don't have the numbers in front of me, but that just is from what I remember it kind of being in most weeks. So cracking 70 and being in the mid 70s, yeah, that's a lot.
Yeah, next week when we do kind of the season wrap-up show, we'll run down all these end-of-season stats and stuff for you. But like you said, going from memory as we bring it up every week, I don't remember anything anywhere close to 73 touchdowns. So, I mean, it was big this week. And, how do you feel about these predictions? I mean, 159 to 90, you haven't even broke the 100 laws. I'm at 101 for incorrect picks, but you haven't even broke the 100 mark for incorrect picks, but I'm still breathing down your neck. I'm still on your heels with 6 games picked different in week 18. In a week they can go anyway.
Yeah, and like we have a lot different, so it could go either way for sure. Like when I keep thinking about this experiment we did with picking every team's schedule game by game, like before the year started, like I can think of it one of two ways. It's either that we're never going to live up to this if we do it again next year because of how good we've been this year. Like the bar is set very high with how well we've done this year. Yeah. Or you can look at it the other way. And I've been kind of thinking about it. And maybe it's one of those like less is more situations. Because like you as well as me, like when I really start looking into games week by week, I go so deep into so many numbers and situations and this and that. Like so much goes into it. And like I feel like I have a great feel for the game. And then half the time it goes completely different than I was expecting it to, not just, of who wins, but, the game script and all that kind of stuff as well. That like maybe, this picking a little more blinds, the less is more in just who the teams are, who's on the roster, maybe, their season long type expectations, maybe that's played a difference too.
Maybe. We'll remember it, I think, when we make these picks next year. Hopefully we will. I was a little scared looking at it because, like I said, there's 6 games different, and I actually picked Washington to win. But now that Dallas is in the driver's seat, maybe they'll sit some people. No, they won't. And so I think you already got a game there up on me. So there's really a 5-game race because I did pick Washington to win because it was week 18, and I expected Dallas.
Well, look, I mean, the only thing you still have going for you in that matchup is the fact that Dallas is 8-0 at home and 3-5 on the road. Okay, so like we keep talking about those home road splits. Getting home games in the playoffs is, of course, a goal for everybody. For certain teams, it's more important than others. And I don't know if there's a team out there right now that it's more important for than the Dallas Cowboys. If they can win this game and clinch that 2 seed, I mean, they don't only get a home game in the first round, but if they win their first game, it guarantees a home game in the second round as well when you're the 2 seed. But they have to go on the road in week 18 to do it. In Washington as 2 touchdown favorites, like they should dominate that game, right? They should destroy Washington. Yeah, and if they don't beat Washington, if they don't win that game and they end up being the 5 seed, as a Cowboy fan, I can safely say I already know everything I need to know about what the Cowboys are going to be in the playoffs this year. And it's that they're not good enough to get it done in those big spots. This is essentially a road playoff game in Washington against a far inferior team. Go out there and win it big.
And they have to. They have to show that they can win on the road. Quick teaser to next week's playoff show. It looks like right now I have I've got 2 for the AFC side. You're doing a little better on that side. And I've got like 3. I'm doing much better. We both did better on the NFC side, but we're still not perfect. A couple games yet to be decided on this one. So it's going to be fun to look at that next week. Make sure you join us. But let's look at week 17 because, man, that was a doozy of a week. Guys, let us know in the comments below what stuck out for you in the games from week 17. That's what we're about to do for you. Number one on the roster before we can get into any of the games, because I want to get this out of the way. We've already brought up the Cowboys as, the talk of the week. Let's just get it done because it's silly that people are talking about it, especially that people are still talking about it. Look, it doesn't matter if he declared he was eligible or not. He wasn't lined up right. He was lined up illegally. I understand it would have been fun to see Detroit pull off this amazing thing. No one likes the controversy more than the media for this Detroit-Dallas ending. The fact of the matter was Detroit screwed up. The players screwed up. And Dallas rightfully won that game. That's all I got to say about that.
I mean, you're 100% right. Like from what I've read too, there was actually 3 penalties on that play. The illegal reporting, the ineligible man downfield, and the illegal touching, so they really messed that one up. And look, Dan Campbell admitted that he was trying to be deceptive with the reporting, trying to kind of trick the Cowboys into who was reporting and who wasn't, which, let's be honest, that's a stupid strategy as well, because when somebody reports, the referees announce which guy is reporting eligible, right? And when they said 70 as reported as eligible, how did nobody on the Lions sideline or coaching staff be like, whoa, like you called the wrong number?
Yeah.
Like, there's so much wrong with that play. And look, Dan Campbell's still going for 2 after the 5-yard penalty, 2 more times as well. Like, doing it from the 7 is a lot different than doing it from the 2. He probably should have just took his extra point at that point as well, which is another thing that nobody's talking about.
Yeah.
And let's not act like that 2-point conversion was with zeros on the clock either. Had they made that 2-point conversion, the Cowboys would have had about 25, 30 seconds with timeouts to try to go get into field goal range for their kicker that literally never misses a kick. So, it's not like if they even converted that 2-point conversion that the game was over. They would have just took the lead in a very late game situation. And sure, they'd be pretty heavily favored to win at that point. But it's not like this was happening with zeros on the clock.
No, and I don't know if anybody noticed the way that CD Lamb was playing that night, but getting downfield probably would not have been much of an issue. I really don't understand why they didn't throw the ball to him even more. I mean, I understand, double-digit targets, but, double-digit receptions and 227 yards. I might not have thrown the ball to anybody else. I might have just kept throwing it to CD until he missed one. I don't know. Monster night, and we called that as well. Other storylines, Flacco. We talked about Flacco. Flacco, wow. I mean, what a find, what a grab to have him come in. I mean, somebody should get a bonus for this one. I mean, Flacco is just tearing it up. Flacco has made the top 10, not to ruin this week's stats. Flacco's made the top 10 every week he's been in. The last 4 weeks in a row. 4 weeks in a row. There's almost no quarterback in the entire league that can say that for the whole season. Hurts can say it. Allen can say it. Howell can say it. And that's about it. And Mr. Joe Flacco, Super Bowl MVP, got Browns fans super hyped up right now. I don't know if they've got enough juice, but I think they're definitely good enough, to be a contender in this, at least.
Look, if Flacco can keep playing the way he's playing, the Browns are legitimate contenders. My concern is that, this kind of has to run out at some point, right? Joe Flacco is playing, better than basically he's ever played, and so, I assume he's going, this is going to stop at some point. If you're a Browns fan, you're hoping that, it lasts through whatever their playoff run is, it doesn't necessarily have to end this year. But look, regardless of how good Flacco's been, and even if Flacco goes and wins the Browns the Super Bowl, right? Teams still aren't lining up this offseason to go sign Joe Flacco because, we know what Joe Flacco is at this point. And if he can catch lightning in a bottle like he has, it's pretty awesome. But can't you just see it right now? Because I already picture it. I know Joe Flacco is going to Baltimore for a playoff game. Like, like it has to happen, right? Like it just seems like a thing of destiny at this point that the Browns are going to win their first round playoff game and they're going to be matched up in Baltimore for a Joe Flacco homecoming in a playoff game.
When we run through this week's stats, which we will in just a few minutes, we run through this week's stats. We're going to bring up CD Lamb again. We're going to bring up Joe Flacco again. He's going to be mentioned in there. But, hats off to both of them. That's a CD Lamb for the season and the week. But Joe Flacco, 4 weeks in a row in the top 10, got his team primed for a run, for a Super Bowl run. Could get the Super Bowl MVP again. Can you imagine? Can you imagine?
Yeah, and he did it this week against arguably the best passing defense in the entire NFL too, in the Jets.
All this does is add fuel to the people who think the NFL is scripted. That's the real takeaway here. New England almost played spoiler in Buffalo. Buffalo barely able to pull this out. Again, New England already beat them this year. They know something about Buffalo. They know how to beat them. I'm not reading too much into this. I'm not getting too worried about Buffalo and their chances. And the fact of the matter is there's still one more game. It's not finished. And this Buffalo-Miami game is going to be absolutely, everything that we expect. It's not going to be a blowout. This is going to be a great game. And it's everything that NFL fans deserve for the last game of the season.
Well, the Bills kind of stumbled to another win, right? Kind of like with that Chargers game. Look, it hasn't looked pretty for the Bills during some of this winning streak. Like the Charger game, they probably should have won by a lot more. The Patriot game shouldn't have been as close as it was. They seem to play up or down to their competition. Because then you can look back earlier in the year. The Cowboy game recently, the first meeting with the Dolphins were two of the best games this season that the Bills played all year. So when they play good teams, they raise up. And when they play the lower teams, they kind of play down to that competition. But this game with Miami, couldn't be more massive for the Bills. There are scenarios that, with your Steelers, for example, with them getting a win against the Ravens, right? Which they probably should, because I assume that the Ravens are going to sit everybody. If your Steelers win, all they need is a Jags or Bills loss to get into the playoffs. So
they'll ruin it. We're going to get into it. They'll ruin it.
You're right, but that's just how crazy the NFL season is with the Bills. They win this game against Miami and they're the 2 seed, and there's a situation where if they lose, they're out. How could your range of outcomes in 1 week be 2 seed and out? That's wild.
We are going to get into all of those playoff scenarios in just a little bit. After the stats, after we talk about a couple storylines from this week, it is coming. We know you guys are salivating. We are salivating because the playoffs, there are some games this weekend. Let me tell you. The Giants, again, we talked about how we said Arizona had a chance to win just because of the stats. Giants, we said the same thing. We said the Giants had a chance against a Rams pass defense. We said Giants receivers were somebody you could look at. We're going to get into that too. Stats coming up. Don't miss it. But the Giants almost pulled it off. They almost did it.
They almost did it. Almost, not quite. And, it just kind of shows again why you need a quarterback, because, when the game was on the line late in the game, they couldn't get it done. And there were some late interceptions and late mistakes. And there it was.
Hey, it wasn't pretty, but they almost got it done. They did not, though. New Orleans took down Tampa Bay. Everybody knows that New Orleans kind of has Tampa Bay on lockdown, but without Lattimore there, it was okay, maybe there's a chance. Well, maybe there wasn't. Tampa gets absolutely shut down, and that cannot make Tampa Bay fans, that cannot make Mayfield fans feel good, because he's been on a tear, and then for New Orleans just to absolutely shut them down. Unexpected. You could say that you expected New Orleans to win this game. You could say New Orleans secondary had something on Tampa Bay. They have for a while, but I didn't expect, that. I didn't expect a goose egg on the board.
No, that's not what I was expecting at all, especially with the way the two teams had been playing leading into the game. Bucs were one of the hottest teams in the NFL entering that game. That kind of all came crashing down. But for them, they're still in a pretty good position anyway, even with that loss. But again, we'll get into that situation later. But if you're a Bucs fan, at least you can kind of rest on that the game, in terms of their postseason chances, didn't mean a whole lot. The game, even with the loss, it didn't really change anything.
Yeah. San Francisco, they come in, they dominate like expected. They have 2 wide receivers, a tight end, uh, all above 1,000 yards. Absolutely ridiculous. They are the team to beat in the NFC. We'll talk about that. Baltimore on the other side, they just beat down Miami. Again, I think that was expected for Baltimore to win. I don't think we expected, again, I don't think we expected that. Congratulations, Lamar, 5 touchdowns. Wow.
I mean, Lamar Jackson back to back weeks, like what he did to the 49ers and the Dolphins. He made his statement that he needed to make for his case for that MVP award. It's his to lose at this point, right?
Um, we're gonna get into that. We're gonna talk about the MVP. Stick around for that one because I want to get your guys' thoughts at home on this MVP race. Because I'm gonna throw out some stats for you, and we're all hot on Lamar right now. Does he deserve the MVP? We'll talk about it. Let's see. Green Bay, Jordan Love, they step up. They get the win when they needed it, and now they're in contention for a playoff run as well.
Well, yeah, I mean, they're another winning in, right? If they win this week, they're in.
And my Steelers, they hit the mark. They got the 500. They got a good chance to get that 10th win, get those double-digit wins as Steeler Nation predicted. I think that's really like the big thing. Like, playoffs, whatever. We know we don't have the team to make a deep run in the playoffs, but Steeler Nation predicted double-digit wins, and we need Tomlin to back us up. That's what we need.
Yeah, for sure. You're in a decent spot. You got to beat the Ravens. Okay, like you got to beat the
Yes.
Ravens, and then whatever happens Sunday, the way that all plays itself out is out of your control. But opening game of the week, Saturday early start, got to win that game against probably backups. Like even if some of the starters start, they're not going to play the whole game. I wouldn't think so for the
You wouldn't
Ravens.
think.
I
Yeah, you
mean,
wouldn't think.
your Steelers are 4-point favorites in Baltimore, which I think tells you
With
everything you
Mason
need to know
Rudolph at
about
quarterback.
what the yeah, right. Like what the odds makers are thinking about what the Ravens are going to do. They would not be making the Steelers 4-point favorites in Baltimore. Baltimore would probably be 10-point favorites
Oh,
with
yeah.
the way they're playing if they
But
were
we did
playing
beat
all
them.
of their starters. So that kind of tells you everything you need to know.
It's a division game. We beat them before. We could take them again. Let's go. Let's get into
You
the
take their
stats.
backups.
Exactly. So let's get into the stats because the stats are fun this week. I love the stats. I know you guys love the stats. Let's get on that stat train. It's a fun ride. Stats brought to you this week by Wake Up Fantasy with TSS Fantasy every Sunday mornings. They get on at 8 a.m. Got the last show of the season coming up. They are just a lot of fun. They do predict games, a lot of skits, a lot of information in there. It's just a good time. Go check them out right here on the Fantasy Sports Corporation every Sunday. Wake Up with TSS Fantasy. Good time had by all. All right, let's get into the stats. I'm going to make myself a little bit smaller for you guys. I'm going to do that. I'm going to let my vanity push it to the side and make it a little bit smaller. We'll get that out of the way and let's talk some stats. We always start with the QBs, fantasy facts about all this week's QBs. And let's get over there. There we go. 35 quarterbacks played this week. 26 of them threw touchdowns. That means 9 of them did not do their job. That's basically how that happened. 6 ran 1 in. 4 of those 6 made the top 10 list, which 4 made the top 10 list last week too, but there was only 4 that ran them in. 5 scored 3 or more touchdowns. We talk about the touchdown bonanza that we had this week. There you go. There's numbers again. 73 touchdowns this week. Absolutely insane. Just numbers. Fun everywhere. 5 with 3+ touchdowns. Number 1 in pass yards. 345 this week. Didn't get over the 400 mark, but he was good enough for QB7. 345, good enough for QB7. We'll figure out who that was. Number 1 in rush yards with 46. Adam, I'm going to ask you if you have a guess on who this is. He is QB, and the reason I'm going to do that is because they didn't make that. It's QB13. QB13, number 1 in rush yards. I'm going to let you think on it for a second because we're going to see QB13 in just a second. Maybe that'll help out. Number 1 for interceptions with 3. 3 interceptions isn't that bad, honestly, this season. And that was going to be good enough for QB 13 again and QB 18. So real quick, Adam, players at home, if you want, if you like, number 1 in rush yards with 46, but 3 interceptions. Who do you think was QB 13?
When I first saw number 1 in rush yards with 46, I was going to Justin Fields at first, but he did not throw 3 interceptions this week.
He did not.
I can't think of who threw 3 interceptions this week, because to me, like, that's the clue there. You know what I mean?
It is, because only 2 quarterbacks had 3 interceptions. One was that number 18, Bailey Zappi. Number 2, and it's funny that you brought up Fields, it was Taylor Heineke.
Oh, okay.
Atlanta. Yep, Atlanta, Chicago, 3 interceptions.
So I was right game, wrong quarterback.
There you go. Number 1 in sacks, got sacked 6 times. QB 8 still made the list. QB 11 also sacked 6 times. And, I'm sorry. And that was Tyrod Taylor and number 33, Bryce Young, who didn't finish the game. Bryce Young wasn't even in the whole game, and he got sacked 6 times. No wonder he wasn't in the whole game. But so did QB 8. We'll talk about who that was in just a second. Number 1 in pass touchdowns with 5. We all know who that is. That's QB1. No mystery there. 14 quarterbacks had 10-plus rushing yards. 6 made the top 10. So we had guys running all over the field, with over half the league, or almost half the league getting there. 6 quarterbacks had plus 300. That's actually a just a little bit high number. That's over average for sure. 3 of those made the top 10. That means you had 3 quarterbacks throw for 300 yards and not make the top 10. That's how this went this week. Wait till we get to the top 10. Let you hear the numbers for the guys that did make it. When you've got guys like Tyrod Taylor throwing 319, not making the list. Matt Stafford 317, not making the list. Baker Mayfield at 309, not making the list. Wait till you hear the numbers on some of the guys that did make the list. It's eye-opening. These are just the top 10 lists right now. Quarterbacks that made the top 10 list. You needed 20.2 to get there, which is 0.4 above the average as it was set this week. 7 of the 10 won. You had 3 losers. We talk about the benefit of losing, how that helps you pad your fantasy stats as you try to chase the win. It happened 3 times this week. 5 out of 10 had less than 20 completions. Less than 20 completions. Half the top 10 list didn't even complete 20 passes. Lamar was one of them. QB6 threw 0 touchdowns. You didn't have to throw touchdowns this week. And I'll tell you, we'll see QB6. Hold on. Only 4 were not here last week. That's actually a flip-flop. Usually only 4 were here last week. Actually, we have 6 repeats from last week. That is way outside the norm. 3 out of the 10 threw under 200 yards. You had 3 guys throw for 300 yards that didn't even make the list. Another 3 guys didn't even throw for 200 yards and made the list. 6, 8, and 10. We'll see their names here in just a second. Adam, didn't ask you on the last one. Out of these first 2 slides, what are the things that are blowing you obviously tell what's blowing my mind. What's blowing your mind right now?
Well, for me, like, it's not necessarily blowing my mind, but it's reiterating that in fantasy football with quarterbacks, touchdowns and rushing yards are way more important than passing yards. Just throwing for a lot of passing yards, it's hard to get high fantasy scores if you're not throwing touchdowns or you don't have that rushing upside.
And Tua, we bring up Tua Tagovailoa. If you had him on your fantasy team, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Guy leads the league in passing yards by a lot, and I don't think he scored. I think it was hasn't scored over 19, but like 1 time, hasn't scored over 15.
Yeah, he's finished outside of the QB1 range for like 7 weeks in a row or something like that.
Yeah, he's way out there. We'll get into him a little later in the show too, just as far as where everybody's. Next week is when we'll really get into that as we talk about the fantasy numbers for the end of the season. Still 40 quarterbacks, no newcomers for the 2nd week in a row. Next week we might have some newcomers, but we probably won't track this list as much because we're going to have so many substitutions. We'll just talk about individual performances because it was fun, but we will still have tons and tons of stats and numbers and all kinds of data for you guys on next week's show as we wrap up the fantasy season and the NFL season. So this week's top 10 list, number 10, Jalen Hurts barely squeaks in there, so he holds on to that record. of most times on the top 10 list this season. Could be challenged, could get challenged this week with the Buffalo game and the fact that I don't know. We're going to see. We're going to see how it all plays out. I don't know. Fourth and Flex, what's up? Bandy and Trey over there at Fourth and Flex. Go check those guys out. Those guys are awesome. I love working with those guys. I inadvertently work with them every week on that Wake Up TSS Fantasy Show. Anyway, number 9, Aiden O'Connell. He makes the list against the Colts. We talked about Adam. We talked about that game being something that Las Vegas could take advantage of, and it's going to come up again in these top 10 lists and these stats lists. It came to fruition. Aiden O'Connell doesn't complete a pass since first quarter of the last game. Makes the top 10 this week. Jake Browning, that's your boy. Jake Browning is your guy. He's there. We'll talk about it when we hit the playoffs. Little, too late. Aiden O'Connell, I believe, is who Bandy's talking about. As his boy, he's killing it. Number 7, Dak Prescott. Thank you, CD Lamb, for getting Dak Prescott back on the list. Josh Allen at number 6, in second place right now, right behind Jalen Hurts for most times on the top 10. Joe Flacco, we talked about at the beginning of the show. Joe Flacco getting it done 4 times in 4 weeks, 4 weeks in the top 10, and he's gotten better every week. He finished first last week. He finishes at 5th this week, but still top 5, 2 weeks in a row. Top 10 list every single week he's been there, has the Browns on a run. Kyler Murray in his takedown in the shocker, takes down the Eagles, lands at number 4. Number 3, Justin Fields. Look, Justin got it done and against a decent defense. You know, I mean, Atlanta is unpredictable, but their numbers are good. Flacco killing it, says Bandy. I love it. He really is. It's phenomenal to see. It would be a fun storyline. It's not the one I'm rooting for, but it'd be a fun storyline to see a Super Bowl MVP get a Super Bowl MVP after all this time, coming back all this time, a couple teams later, and coming back and getting the MVP. That'd be interesting. That'd be fun. Jordan Love, Green Bay does it again. That's what everybody's going to say anyway. He's got him in the playoff run. We're going to talk about it. We're going to break down that. And, of course, Lamar Jackson. Not even going to try and ask Adam who was it that made it. Bandy likes it. Bandy says Flacco for MVP. We're on the Flacco train right now, Bandy, you and me. Let's ride it all the way to the end. Adam, top 10 list. Give me your thoughts. You guys at home, type them in as well. What do you think about the top 10 list this week?
You know, Jordan Love has very quietly been awesome recently in fantasy football and regular NFL. He's racking up top 10s just about every week over the last month or so. He's playing his best football right now, which is what you want to see, you know, for a contending team, that you're playing your best football late in the season. And, you know, the other name that's jumping out to me is a guy that I loved last week. I gave him out as a play last week. We talked about him on the show. I said he was my favorite DFS quarterback to use this week, and that was Kyler Murray. I said, start Kyler Murray in fantasy football. The Eagles defense, passing defense, can't stop anybody. They can't stop anybody. Their passing defense is awful. And, you know, with that pass rush that they like to do, that works into Kyler's strengths with the way that he scrambles around and zigzags. Like, he likes the pressure coming at him. That's kind of where he operates best. So that was my favorite play. He delivered with a nice, you know, number 4 overall QB this week. Yeah. And you know, I mean, I guess at this point, it's just, you know, start anybody against the Eagles. If you're playing DFS this week, I guess you start Tyrod Taylor at quarterback.
Maybe. I mean, look, like the Giants almost got it done. And look, Jordan Love, not to get, you know, ruin it, but Jordan Love's QB5 in fantasy points right now. QB5 for your fantasy team. I mean, every week hasn't been great, but there he is. We're going to talk all about that next week. We'll break down the fantasy season. We're going to wrap up all your fantasy numbers, and not just like who's led in which category. You guys can look that up on your own. We're going to break down some of these big stats, these deep stats that we like to do right here on the show. Bandy says they're missing big play Slay. They sure are. God forbid they get him back. Eagles in trouble, much to the chagrin of the Cowboys. Let's get into the RBs. Oh, wait, hold on. I know you guys love the videos. I don't want to cut you out on your videos. Let's do the RB. I spent a lot of time on those videos, damn it, so I'm going to play them. And you guys like them, admit it. Uh, we get into the RBs. RBs, all the stats for all the RBs this week. 7 RBs went plus 100, and 6 of those made the top 10. Someone went over 100 and didn't make the top 10, but that's actually not unusual if you watch the show. 15 running backs had rushing touchdowns. 9 had receiving touchdowns only. 9 running backs only had a receiving touchdown. Bandy, I love you. Thanks, bud. He says show's looking great. Love the vids. We'll keep it going next year. Hopefully, we'll keep it looking better. Fourth and flex. Love those guys. Flexing on everybody though. We're just trying to get to your level, Josh. 5 had 2+ touchdowns. 5 running backs 2+ touchdowns. That's a little odd. Most of the time they get 1, maybe 1 run, 1 pass. We had 5 with 2+ touchdowns, and all 5 of them made the top 10. Interesting. 77 running backs had rushing attempts. We had 77 running backs enter the game this week. 61 running backs had catches. It's not a secret, but the NFL using running backs for more than just running. Again, 9 running backs only had receiving touchdowns, no rushing touchdowns. I love to see the evolution of the game. Number 1 in rush yards. He went 18 for 130. That's a pretty nice average for RB2. We'll see who that is in just a second. Number 1 in receiving yards. Well, number 1 went 1 for 75. That was Tyler Algier. So I put there RB9 was the number 2 guy. And he went 5 for 64. A few more catches there. Helped out your PPR rosters a little more than Tyler Algier did, but congrats to Tyler Algier, bust a 75-yard run. Good for you, bud. Number 1 in attempts, 27 attempts for 122 was RB7. So we will see who that is in a second. Keep that in the back of your head. Who had 27 attempts for 122? It was RB7. And number 1 in receptions went 9 for 42. Not a lot of yards, but 9 catches definitely padded your PPR stats. That was RB3. So we see RB2, we see RB3, 7, and 9 up here in the top categories. Number 1, not there, but we'll see why in a second. I'm sure you can already guess who that is. RB9 had a 16 yards per run carry average, 16 yards. RB9. That's why he's up there at 5 for 64. He also went 5 for 64 in reception yards. All right. But he also had 16 yards per carry. Does that clue you in? I'm going to ask you, Adam, who you think that is in just a second. 16 yards per carry and 5 for 64, RB9. If you guys got a guess, put it in the comments below. RB5 had a 28.5 yards per catch average. 28.5 on every catch for RB5. We'll see who that is in just a second as well. I probably should have switched these slides so we can keep these numbers in the forefront of our mind because it's interesting. Who they were. So the top 10 list, just the top 10 guys this week. You needed 20.9, which is 2.6 above average. You had to show out this week to make the top 10 list for RBs. 5 out of 10 did not have a rushing touchdown on the top 10 list. We saw 9 only had a rushing touchdown. 5 have made the list. They did not have a rushing. Half the list of running backs make the list without a rushing touchdown. Remember that next year when you draft. 7 out of 10 with a receiving touchdown this week. Those stats go hand in hand. Remember that next year when you draft. 8 out of 10 won this week. 5 had more than 1 touchdown. That's above average, which is why you needed more points to make the top 10 list. All 10 went plus 100 all-purpose yards. Not necessarily 100 yards rushing, but all-purpose. Everybody made it over 100. That is very outside the norm, which is why that top 10 minimum is so high. RB7 had 0 targets, though. We talked about RB7. He's the 27 carries for 122, 0 targets. Makes a top 10 list. Any idea who that is? Let us know in the comments below. 50 have now made the list. We got 50 total running backs over the entire season who made the list as we added one, so we will see a new name on there. Adam, before we get into the list, only 2 were here last week. We talk about the inconsistency. We talk about the matchups, how important matchups are. Look, you got to be a waiver wire wizard to win your league. Tell us how you did in your fantasy championships this week over your fantasy season. If you worked the wire, you were probably there. We'll talk about that too when we get into that in just a few minutes. But only 2 were here last week. That's actually pretty normal. We don't get a lot of repeats on the top 10 list. Adam, talk to me.
I mean, it's versatility, right? It's kind of been the name of the game this year when we talk about the running backs, and it's that versatility, being able to contribute multiple ways towards your fantasy value. We obviously know, the receiving upside when it comes to running backs, especially ones that get a lot of targets and receptions. How much, like the receiving upside for a running back is similar to the rushing upside for a quarterback, right? Like
Yeah,
it
yeah.
both raises their ceiling and can really have massive stuff, but, maybe even more importantly, running backs who consistently catch passes and quarterbacks who consistently run the ball, it raises their floor so much higher on a weekly basis.
It really does. We're going to play this game with y'all at home. I'm going to go back because I know y'all are curious. Let's do it again. RB2, 18 for 130. RB9 shows up twice in these stats for most receptions, and he had a 28.5 I'm sorry, a 16 yards, 16 yards per carry. So he's on there for carries and receptions. We got RB7 for attempts, and also did not get a single target. Most rushing attempts, no receiving targets, and we had number 3 in receptions with 9 for 42. So knowing all this, knowing these numbers, let's look at our top 10. Top 10, Khalil Herbert, who I apologize and admit my mistakes on TSS Fantasy on the Dingus Picks of the Week. I said Khalil Herbert was not going to be worth the play this week because of the fact that Chicago's a three-headed monster. He makes the top 10. I was wrong. Means he got at least 20.9 points for you. So, hey, I admit it. Congratulations, Khalil Herbert. That's with Justin Fields also making the top 10 list. So wrap that around your head when we talk about these playoff matchups because Atlanta is involved. Number 9 was Justice Hill. I gave you this one. Number 9. All right, number 9. He had 16 yards per carry. He had the most receiving yards. Justice Hill had a friggin' day. If you had him on your roster, then I want to see it because I don't think you did. Khalil Herbert had, Justice Hill had a day in Baltimore. Ends up at number 9, most receiving yards, 16.0 per carry average. Again, Josh says and he corrected it, called Khalil Herbert as a must start. See, that's why you got to listen to Fourth and Flex. Guys know what they're doing. I wish you told me that before I made my Dingus picks. Number 8, Devon A. Chain. I don't care. I'm calling him that. I don't until he sends me a letter and says not to. I'm doing it because it's just a badass nickname. A. Chain. We said last week on the show, did we not, Adam, that A. Chain was going to be a sneaky play against this Baltimore offense? We called it. We said it. You should have listened. If you did, you won some money. Way to go, Adam. I give you the credit for that one. Najee Harris ruined that one too. RB7 was the guy with the most carries and 0 targets. Most carries with 27, 0 targets. I think that one's interesting, Adam, because we talked about the versatility and we talked about the guys on this list who are running and passing. Najee had himself a day as well, but he did it without being a factor in the receiving room.
Yeah, and he usually is, right? Like he usually does catch some passes and usually has that. Like when you had, your stats before with the RB9 and RB7 thing, I did know the Najee Harris one because I saw his line recently with how many carries he got kind of blew me away. And Jalen Warren actually still did okay too, despite
Yeah.
Najee getting all of those carries. But I will fully admit the Justice Hill one, I had no idea who that was. I was running through names in my head trying to guess who that guy was because you kind of built up 7 and 9 on this list. I was not coming up with Justice Hill at all, so that one definitely jumps out.
We try to keep people on their toes. I mean, we're not, sometimes we give it away like I just did, but I do try to keep it going. That's why I love these stats. That's why I run them. I'm just big stats. Travis Etienne, we said he was going to have a good day. He absolutely did have a great day. He finishes at RB6 for everybody. RB5, Jerome Ford, and those Cleveland Browns, Flacco on the list, Ford on the list. Usually it's the quarterback and receiver combo, and we are going to see that when we get to that list, but more and more and more we see the quarterback running back combo. There it is again, just on this list alone. James Conner at number 4, quarterback Kyler Murray, James Conner on the list, both here. Pay attention to that next season. I'm telling you, you got to look for those stacks and you got to play that wire. RB3 was Breece Hall. A lot of people might have thought he was RB2. Brees Hall was actually RB3, still killed it. First, one of the first games of the week. All for naught, but it's been that way. I kind of applaud Brees Hall for the effort that he's still been giving all year. I don't know if it's a contract incentive. I don't know if it's because he's young and he's hungry. But hooray for Brees Hall because he's really brought it this season. RB2. RB2 was on our list. It's Isaiah Pacheco. Did anybody see that? Did you watch the games and think, oh yeah, Pacheco made RB2? I wouldn't because he kind of did it quietly. He had some big plays, but there you go. RB2. RB1, Adam, RB1. Who's it got to be? There's only one name here. The color scheme says it all. Who's RB1?
I know exactly who it is, and it's a guy that I'm going to be targeting in every single one of my fantasy drafts next year. He is the waiver wire MVP of this season, Kyren Williams.
It is indeed Kyren MFN Williams. I'm telling you, this kid is on fire. Look out, Rams. Nobody gave the Rams this much credit. Nobody thought the rookies were going to step up. Like, I'm sorry. I'm telling you, nobody did. The Rams didn't know. Kyren Williams, Puka Nacua coming through for the Rams. Kyren Williams going to be big next year. On Brees Hall, Bandy says he stayed away from him. Wish he would have grabbed him up. I actually did grab him up. But, again, it's still intermittent. He didn't show up every week, but he sure showed up on the season. We'll talk more about that next week. Josh, Kyren Williams to the moon. Absolutely. We love us some Kyren Williams. We love to see a running back succeed because when running backs go big, it's just, man, whoo, running backs. Love it. Kyren Williams. We're going to talk about, our picks for rookies of the year and stuff next week when we wrap up this season. Obviously, he's on the list. He may be the front runner. I don't know. Let us know what you think. Come back next week and tell us all about it. Let's hit the wide receivers so we can get into the playoff talk. Wide receivers, here we go. These are the wide receivers for this week. Not just the top 10 guys. This is all the wide receivers for this week. Here we go. 22 wide receivers caught touchdowns this week. That's pretty good. Pretty good. 22 guys taking one to the house. 11 wide receivers went over 100. Again, that's above average. That's pretty good to have 11 guys going over 100 yards. Only one ran one. Adam, I know you're on mute right now. If you're there, I am going to ask you again. I'm going to give you redemption points here. Who was the one wide receiver to run one in this week?
CeeDee Lamb.
It was CeeDee Lamb. Congratulations, Adam. You got it.
I was ready for that one this week. I was disappointed in myself last week when that one came up. I knew I wasn't going to miss it if I got asked again, not with my guy CeeDee.
I was ready for you, and I knew you'd be ready too. We laughed because last week I asked, last time CeeDee ran one in, I asked Adam who ran one in. Adam was at the game and just could not figure it out. He got it this week. 9 had double-digit targets. 9 wide receivers, double-digit targets. This keeps going down and down and down. 2 weeks ago, it was over 20. It was 21 wide receivers had double-digit targets, and only 1 was able to pull them in. Last week, we had 15, and only 2 were able to pull theirs in. This week, only 9 had double-digit targets. So they're dialing it back and not making their wide receivers look so bad. Still, though, only 2 were able to pull into double-digit receptions. We know one was CeeDee Lamb. Do you know who the second one is? Put it in the comments before I say it on the top 10 list. It was a lot more. It was a lot. Number 1 in reception yards with 227. No mystery here. I don't know why I even put wide receiver 1. We know exactly who it was. CeeDee Lamb. Lamb went ham this week. Number 1 in rush yards with 35. That was wide receiver 13. So not, making the top 10 list. But I'm going to pull it up here. I don't even know what stat I just looked up. I'm not going to pull it up here because I don't want to waste your time. It was wide receiver 13. He was number 1 rush yards. It was only 35. We'll pull it up later on if you're interested. Let me know in the comments below. There we go. Number 1 for receptions with 13. Number 1 for receptions with 13. Okay, so 2 guys caught 13 balls. We know one was CeeDee Lamb. All right, the other guy also caught 13 balls. He had 21 targets. Wide receiver 2 had 21 targets. Still managed to pull in 13. Who was it? Let me know. 3 out of 4 wide receivers with 2 total touchdowns made the top 10. 4 guys had 2 touchdowns. 3 of them made the top 10. So, again, do you get double touchdowns? I don't know. Wide receiver 2 had 21 targets. Again, who was it? David says Nico Collins. Maybe.
Nope.
It's not. But
nope.
Maybe. But it's not.
I know it.
Good guess, though, David. Good guess. Adam thinks he's got it down. Before we get there, we will get into it. These are the stats for just the top 10 guys. Is anything on that first list before I get into anything exciting for you here, Adam?
Yeah, I mean, nothing crazy jumps out. Like targets obviously matter most, for wide receivers. It's hard to do a lot if you're not getting a lot of opportunities. Minus, the rare few, home run hitter type of guys there, like Rashid Shaheed, who can have little targets and he still has a couple of top tens this year, and then a couple of goose eggs as well. But in general, you want wide receivers who get targeted a lot.
Absolutely. One guy got targeted 21 times. You needed 19.9. That's a full point above the average as it stands after week 17 to make the list. So you had to show out a little bit to make the list this week. Only 2 were here last week. Again, talk about this consistency. Just because you were top 10 last week does not mean you're going to be top 10 this week. It happened across the entire season. We'll break all that down for you next week. Make sure you're here. We are going to change the way you play fantasy football next week. I guarantee it when you see the numbers as we track them. These aren't numbers you can just pull up on Yahoo and they just pop up. These are numbers we tracked every single week to give you the final things, and they are eye-opening, mind-blowing. They will change the way you play fantasy football. Make sure you're here next week to catch those end-of-season numbers. 8 of 10 were here for the second or less. So one guy was here for the first time. Other guys making it for the second time in that part 4 of the season since week 13. We talk about how we break the season up into 4 chapters. Part 4, 13 on. 8 of these guys are only here for the second time in part 4. 6 of the 10 won, so 4 losers. We talk about losing teams chasing the win, padding your fantasy numbers. 7 of 11 wide receivers on our plus 100 made the list. So 11 guys, we talked about that, made the plus 100 plus yards. 7 of them made the list. 4 of them did not. Again, changing the way you think about fantasy football. Just because you get 100 yards does not mean you made the top 10. But we'll also break down why it doesn't mean you didn't because of the numbers of receivers that play every week. Both the Packers and the Giants have 2 wide receivers on the list. The Giants have 2 wide receivers on the list, ladies and gentlemen, for the first time ever. You're going to love it. You're going to love it. You got to love it. Adam, before we run through the list, Bandy says 21 targets is absolutely ridiculous. We're going to see who that is. With this right here, talk to me.
Yeah, I mean, the 21 targets is ridiculous, but I'm pretty sure I do know who it is. But yeah, I mean, seeing that the Packers and the Giants each have 2 wide receivers on the list, that's pretty wild as well. Probably, not names that you're going to see on many top 10s, especially with the Packers, because I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure I know who the 2 are. Obviously, I know who one of them is. I think I know who the other one is as well, who's a guy that, look, if anybody played that guy, the guy that I'm thinking of, if you truly played him in your lineups this week, send me a screenshot and you're better than I am at fantasy football.
We'll have something for you. We will have a prize for you if you send me a screenshot of
if you can prove it.
Yep, if you can prove it. Don't give me some mocked up PowerPoint thing. I see right through that.
I believe he comes from Rutgers, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, we'll find out. Josh guessed that your 21 target guy was Reed. Another good guess.
No.
Another wrong guess. Let's get into it. I know you guys are waiting for it. Let's talk about it. 62 have now made the list. We added 3 more. 62 wide receivers have made the top 10. We talk about how it changes week to week. Next week, we're going to blow your mind. I can't wait. 3 more get on there. We'll see who they are right now. At number 10, not your 21 target guy, but Wan'Dale Robinson, new to the list. Congratulations, Giants. You finally got somebody here. And he brought along a friend. We'll get into that in a second. George Pickens makes the list. George Pickens, another one of my do not plays this week. Just barely squeaks in to the list. But, I mean, hey, he made it. He got you 20 points. And, if you played Pickens, took the risk, you were happy. with it. Darius Slayton is the friend he brought along. Wan'Dale Robinson, 2 Giant receivers on the list. There you go, 8 and 10. Congratulations, Giants. Amon-Ra St. Brown, here all the time. He's going to be a force to be reckoned with in the playoffs and next season and for many seasons to come. Number 6, there's one of them, Bo Melton. Is that your boy, Adam? Is that who you're talking about?
That's it.
There he is, Bo
Rutgers
Melton.
University, right down the road from where I live, Bo Melton.
There it is. Hey, congratulations to David. He's on it. Bo Melton making the list for the first time in his life. Brandon Ayuk makes it to number 5. Really not unexpected. It was kind of like, is it Debo, is it Ayuk? But I think Ayuk was probably the favorite to make the list this week. San Francisco, again, 2 wide receivers and a tight end and a running back, all over 1,000 yards. Have to be your Super Bowl favorite at this point, especially since the road to the big game runs through them. I don't know. No real surprise there. Jaden Reed at number 4. Still not your 21 target guy, but there's your second guy. Reed's kind of been out of nowhere. I don't know. He if you had him in the right weeks, if you waiver wired him, you did well on your fantasy matchups for those weeks. Anyway, I like Jaden Reed.
Jaden Reed?
Yeah, I like him.
I love Jaden Reed because he gets the rushing stuff too. He also has a great nickname that I heard recently, which kind of made me laugh. They're calling him the Dairy Belt Debo.
Yes, I read that as well. The
Love
Dairy
it.
Belt Debo. I was like, that is awesome. I was going to.
I
I'm
love it.
glad you brought it up. DJ Moore absolutely lights out again. Justin Fields on the list. Khalil Herbert on the list. DJ Moore on the list. What's the running theme here, Adam? To have 3 guys on one team from a fantasy perspective.
Wait, what? DJ Moore, Jaden Reed, who?
No, DJ Moore, Khalil Herbert, Justin Fields. 3 guys, one team on the list.
Oh, right, yeah, like the whole stacking thing, which has been interesting because you're right. Traditionally, when you think stack, you think quarterback, wide receiver. And you mentioned it during your running back segment, and I didn't comment on it then, but we're kind of seeing it now too, that like a lot of times you can stack quarterback, running back, and like traditional wisdom used to be like they'll kind of take away from each other's touchdowns in a sense, and like you don't really want to have both because like it limits their upside, but we've seen it a lot of weeks this year that if a quarterback's on there, the running back can be as well. I think you used the Flacco Ford example a little bit earlier. And then, the Bears are another one as well. So if you're stacking, you can do a triple stack. You can do quarterback, wide receiver, and running back, or pick any 2 out of 3, those types of situations.
Here we go. Number 2. Do you have your pick for who you think this is?
I do, and I believe it is the guy that is the reason why Aiden O'Connell made a surprise appearance in the top 10 quarterbacks this week, and that's because all he did was throw the ball to Davante Adams.
Why don't more quarterbacks do this? Take your number 1 guy, especially if you're the new guy off the bat. Like, if you're the new guy, just throw it to your MVP receiver. Like, just throw it to your all-pro guy. That's all you got to do. 21 targets for Davante Adams. Man, good job, David, for tracking that one.
Let's not forget, too, with that exact concept that you're just talking about, that's how Dak Prescott turned his entire season around, right? That's how he went from, like, not doing much in the beginning of the year to being an MVP candidate. The only thing he changed is he said, I'm just going to throw it to CeeDee Lamb every play. More quarterbacks need to start doing it.
I'm telling you, like, if you've got one, if you are lucky enough to have an all-pro receiver, to have one of these elite guys, just throw it to him. Just give him the shot. 21 times, he pulls down 13, and they damn near pulled off the win. Sure, they got the loss, so you can make the argument there, but 13 and 21, not a bad stat line. And, of course, number 1, no big surprise here, CeeDee Lamb, absolutely ridiculous. And again, the shocking part is that it was against this Detroit defense. And Detroit's defense is not great against the pass, but their defense has done enough. They play in a really crappy defense division. Their defense fits their division, which is why so many teams were still in the running right up until the end. It's why the Packers are still there. It's why Minnesota just got is on the edge. Because there's not a great defense, but bravo to Dak and the Cowboys for really just taking advantage of it and throwing to your guy. Number one, number two, 13 receptions.
Yeah, I mean, look, the Lions' passing defense actually has been an issue this year, especially in the second half of the season. Last year, we know how awful it was. Kind of the early part of this year, it looked like they had kind of solved that problem. This second half of the season has proven they have not solved that problem. But to their credit, they may be the best rushing defense in the NFL. They're right up there in the top five in pretty much all those rushing categories, but it's, polarizing. They're awful against the pass, great against the run.
We are going to talk. We got some playoff talk running through the comment thread, and we are going to talk playoffs, all the numbers, everything you want to talk about playoffs coming up after my favorite part of the show, and that is the Pulse with Hulse. It's the Fantasy Hulse Check. This is my favorite part of the show because, frankly, we have NFL writer Adam Hulse. He writes NFL stuff for Sportskeeda at sportskeeda.com. Just put a slash with Adam Hulse. You'll get all his great content. Pumps it out every week, 4, 5, 6, 10, 20 articles, whatever it is that week. We ask Adam 3 questions. Adam has no idea what these questions are going to be. We have not rehearsed this. He has not been asked a question. Sometimes I make them up during the show. But I do have some set up for Adam this week. Adam, most disappointing this season. Normally I have a little lead into this, but this is straight up. The most disappointing team, and you can go each side, AFC, NFC. What to you, just off the top of your head, again, have been the 2 big disappointments this season? And injuries do not count. You don't get to say the Jets because Aaron Rodgers went down.
I don't think I would have said the Jets anyway from the AFC. For me, and look, like I know injuries had a lot to do with it, but it has to be the Cincinnati Bengals, in my opinion. Like injuries, of course, play a factor, but let's not kid ourselves. Let's remember that even before Joe Burrow went down, the Bengals were not looking very good this season, and they were looking like a borderline playoff team anyway, and they needed a strong finish to the year, even with Burrow, to have a shot at making the playoffs. Their loss last week, they're now officially mathematically eliminated. This was a team that was supposed to be a Super Bowl contender. They've been right there the last couple of years, right in that mix. They've gotten to a Super Bowl, came up a little bit short. They're getting to the AFC Championship game 2 years in a row. So for them to not even make the playoffs, despite, Burrow missing a lot of the year, they were no lock to get in even when Burrow was playing. So I would go with the Bengals in the AFC.
Sure. Do you want to go NFC, or are you just happy with the Bengals? Is that just like your overall one?
I don't know if there really was a major disappointment in the NFC this year. I mean, when you look record wise, I mean, sure, like you could say the Giants, some might say the Giants because they made it to the playoffs and won a playoff game last year and then to be this bad this year. But I saw that coming, and same thing can be said like for the Vikings. Like during all of our off-season shows, there was a running theme that the Giants are absolute frauds. Absolute frauds. A lot could be said with the Vikings too, but the Giants even more so. So some may be surprised at the regression of the Giants. That doesn't surprise me. When I look at the rest of the teams, maybe the Seahawks, they've definitely been disappointing. That was a team that me and you were both high on. It looks like, they can still maybe sneak into the playoffs, but like they're in a bad situation too right now. So they might not even make it. But again, it's like, not super surprising because Geno Smith is still their quarterback and he's not a long-term solution at quarterback. They still need a quarterback. So, there's surely been some disappointments in the NFC. None of them super glaring that I can't believe and didn't see coming or anything like that.
We got a lot of playoff talk going on in the comments. Don't worry, guys. I'm not skipping over it. I'm just saving it for the playoff talk that we are going to have in just a couple minutes. I got a couple more questions for NFL writer Adam Hulse, and we will get into the playoff talks. A lot to talk about there. The Seahawks, I had them going to the Super Bowl this year. I don't know if that's going to happen, but we did predict all that before the season started, so I don't feel horrible about it, but I'd still like to see that pick come through. I don't know if anybody's going to be able to beat San Francisco. Let's flip it. Who are the most surprising teams? Who are the ones that are like, wow, that wasn't supposed to happen on each side of there.
Well, the first one that comes to mind for me as soon as you said it was the Houston Texans.
Yeah,
This is a
absolutely.
team that, has been one of the worst teams in the league for a few years now. In the offseason, too, like we liked some of the moves that the Texans made towards their rebuild, but I was pretty consistent in saying that, like, I think they're going in the right direction, but this is going to be another awful season. It's going to take time to adjust to the new roster, the new quarterback, the new coach. And, like, I like the D'Amico Ryans hire, but I thought this would all take some time. And, like, I
Yeah,
thought the pieces they were adding made sense, but it was more of a build for later than it was right now. But the Texans are in a very simple situation right now. If they win on Saturday night against the Colts, they're in the playoffs with, this roster that's not talented compared to, the other playoff teams. The Texans, position for position don't really match up, but they keep finding ways to win. They keep getting it done. And in an AFC conference that had a lot of teams in that mix for the playoff spots, the Texans are in control of their own spot.
absolutely. And I mean, you said it. Everything that I was thinking. It was supposed to be a rebuild year, and here they are in
Yeah.
playoff contention. Obviously, they're going to come up heavy in this uh, playoff talk we're about to get into. On the other side, you have them for the other side that you're surprising for the NFC.
For the NFC, I mean, I think I'm going to go with the Rams. And like the Rams were a team that, we talked about, like, if everything goes right for them this year, like they could be a sneaky wild card contender. We did talk about that when we did our Rams preview prior to the season, because of Stafford, Kupp, and Aaron Donald, right? But it hasn't really been Stafford, Kupp, and Aaron Donald. It's been Puka Nacua. It's been Kyron Williams. It's been a masterful coaching job by Sean McVay, who's still one of the best in the business that people kind of seem to forget about sometimes. And, so this Rams team that a lot of people had the Rams circled as they were going to be like, a bottom five team again and maybe looking for a quarterback in the draft coming up and, picking towards the top and the rebuild and, all the stuff with Les Snead and all the draft picks he traded away. He went all out for that one Super Bowl ring and got it. And then we all talked about this maybe being the dark ages again of the Rams. They sold their souls for a Super Bowl, and now they're going to suffer for like many years trying to recover from all the trades that they made. But Sean McVay has them right back in the playoffs. They've already clinched their wild card spot. They are in. They are in the playoffs. So, props to the Rams.
Amazing. Yeah, that's kind of the one for me as well. Is the Rams for sure. Probably for everybody. I think that's pretty I don't know, evident, pretty the low hanging fruit, if you will. Told you the Expo would do that. Texans would do better expected. You did, David. He absolutely did. They 100% have done better than expected, better than I expected. And Josh, as you said, that D. It happens. It's there's important things on this show. Last question, the MVP. We're gonna talk more about MVP next week, obviously, and that'll be the conversation until they announce it. But MVP, I want to tailor the question correctly. So, can I assume that Lamar Jackson is your pick for MVP at this point right now?
I mean, of course,
Okay.
at this point, like, is there a follow up to that
So this is
question?
yes, yes. So this is the question. I want to make sure I didn't want to ask the question before I knew that Lamar Jackson leads the league in absolutely nothing except rush yards. He's way outside the top 10 even in yards. He's way outside. He's up there. I think for touchdowns. He does have a good interception rate. I'll give him that. He absolutely does. He's not there for touchdowns. Is Lamar Jackson. He's not there for yardage. Is Lamar Jackson. I think he's 13 in yardage. Yeah, he does lead in rush yards. He doesn't even lead in rush touchdowns. Allen and Hurts both have 15. He has 5. He's third with 5. He leads in absolutely nothing except rush yardage. Why does Lamar Jackson deserve the MVP?
Because the MVP is not a statistical award. Like it's not about statistics necessarily. It's not a fantasy football award. It's not a, light up the scoreboard kind of award. It's who provides the most value to their team's success. So the number one requirement for an MVP is that they have to be on a successful team. You never see the MVP given to a guy who plays on a bad team, because how much value are they really bringing to their team if their team's not winning, right? And what Lamar has done with the Ravens this year, and I referenced it before, what he did against the Niners and the Dolphins in recent weeks, who, record wise are top three teams in the NFL. And he absolutely smoked them, destroyed them, made them look like they were not even in the same league as the Ravens. That was his statement on why he should win MVP. Now, look, I would like to say that guys like Josh Allen, Dak Prescott have a shot to win MVP still. But if you look at the odds for the award right now, nobody else has a shot. Lamar Jackson is minus 20,000. Minus 20,000 to win the MVP right now. Which means if you want to bet on Lamar to win the MVP and you want to win $100, you got to lay 20 grand just to win $100. The bookmakers are telling you the race is over. Lamar won the award.
I did not know that. I agree. I mean, the award is called Most Valuable Player, and you can make the case that, with any of these teams, without Tua, what are the Dolphins?
Well, look, like Lamar's not going to win Offensive Player of the Year. He's not going to win Offensive Player of the Year because that's a statistical award. That's going to be maybe Christian McCaffrey, maybe even Josh Allen. There's been times where different quarterbacks have won MVP and Offensive Player of the Year. That has happened before, and that can happen because, again, MVP is not statistical, it's valuable.
I would throw Prescott and Purdy in that situation as well. Brock Purdy's pulled off an amazing season. He's second in second in touchdowns. He's second in yardage. Obviously we know what he means to that team. I like Brock Purdy at least in that conversation. But back to the MVP. Yeah, you're right. I mean, we got five quarterbacks right now over 4,000 yards. We'll probably have somewhere around 7 or 8. We could have 9 or 10. We could get 10. We could get 10 quarterbacks over 4,000 yards this year. Lamar won't be one of them. And so that is a difference. We will talk about Offensive Player of the Year versus MVP, but I agree. Lamar probably has this sewn up. Well, with $20,000 or minus 20,000 on the odds, I guess you're right. This race is probably over. Again, my favorite part of the show: 3 random questions for NFL writer Adam Hulse. Check out all his knowledge at sportskita.com. It's Kita with a K. There he is. Go check him out. He's on Twitter too at Adam Hulse Sports. Guy's just wicked smart. Check him out everywhere you can find him. Let's talk some playoffs, everybody. Let's get into it. Let me wrap up the Hulse. Playoffs. Yeah, it's time to start talking some playoffs. We've got some great conversation going on in the thread about the playoffs. We're going to go right down the line. The big story, you brought it up, Adam. Cincinnati officially eliminated. Browning, not enough. Jake played well, not enough to overcome the beginning of the season. Burrow being out was not good enough. So here are the teams in contention right now as it stands to make the playoffs in the AFC. All right. Look, you've got the Bills, who have not wrapped it up. Miami is in, but the Bills are not in, which is interesting. So they have to win to get in. But if they win, they are 100% in. They could even flip-flop with Miami if they win this game. So it's going to be 2 and 6 for the seeding, but it's Miami and Buffalo in each one of those. So really we're playing for the 7th spot. Teams in contention for that 7th spot are the Colts, the Texans, the Steelers, and Jacksonville. I mean, let's be honest. Jacksonville, they all sit with 9 wins. All right, so it's kind of a win and you're in scenario for the most part. Jacksonville wins, they are in. That's it, game over. Nothing you can do about that. The Colts can get in to that 7th spot with a win because they own the tiebreaker over Houston. But the fun part, NFL's not scripted, is that the Texans play the Colts in the last game of the season. So someone's got to win that game to to advance in the playoffs. Now, if Jacksonville loses, Colts or Texans, one of them has to win, so the other one's going to get eliminated, and the Steelers win, they still have an outside shot to get that 7th spot. Here are the games. Bills are going to play at Miami, all right? And Atlanta, let's do it like this. The Bills are going to play Miami, Pittsburgh's going to play Baltimore. Houston is going to play at the Colts. Those are your Saturday games, so we're going to know that picture before Sunday's games ever kick off. We'll know who's still in contention. If it's Houston or the Colts, we'll know if Pittsburgh is still in contention or not, if they win or lose. So that'll take care of that. I've got to get to this thing. You see, the Steelers could make the playoffs even with a loss this week. Huge outside chance. It could happen. It's so far out there. I don't want to get too far into it unless you do, Adam, but I don't think it's necessary to do that.
Well, no, because I think it requires teams ending in ties. Like for the Steelers to lose this week, they would need teams to tie and whatnot. So it's not even really worth talking about.
Absolutely. Jacksonville must win. Okay. Jacksonville is out with a loss and a Pittsburgh win. Okay. Jacksonville would be out. Okay. So that's really your scenario. So we talked about the Saturday games. Then we talk about the Sunday games. So we'll already know one of the teams after Saturday. On Sunday, we know the last game of the season is Buffalo at Miami. That's kind of an outside scenario because, again, Miami's already in. Buffalo wins. Buffalo has the easiest chance to get in even if they lose because they're already a game up. So they're likely.
I don't know about that.
It still takes quite a bit to push them out, but they could if they
No. If the Steelers and Jags both win, then the Bills are a must-win team on Sunday night, or they are out.
Well,
out.
They are, but I'm just saying that of the they have the best chance. I'm not saying it's improbable for them to get kicked out. I'm just saying they have the hardest probability to get kicked out. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying it's not possible. I'm just saying they have the lowest probability of getting kicked out. It could happen. You're absolutely right, though. It could happen. That Jacksonville game will happen in the morning slate or the early afternoon, depending on where you live in the country. What are you thinking about this one? How's it going to wrap up at the end? Let's just save some people some time. How's this one going to finish out?
Well, I hate to break it to you, but I don't think your Steelers are going to get in. I think that the Steelers are going to win against the Ravens, but I don't think that they're going to get the help that they need because I think that the Bills are going to go into Miami and they're going to beat the Dolphins. I do think that the Bills are going to win that game and the Bills are going to end up being the 2 seed after their roller coaster of a season, right? It's been up and down the whole way for the Bills. Even this week, it's an up and down situation. If things don't fall the right way, they're out. And it's not like they need something like weird and miraculous and so out there for them to be out. I mean, it's a pretty simple situation that they're out, and it's a very possible chance that going into Sunday night, the Bills are going to be, if they win, they're the 2 seed. If they lose, they're not in the playoffs. That's like an insane scenario to have to play a game in. But I do think that the Bills, Josh Allen has always proven that he shows up in the biggest games, in the biggest spots. He's proven his clutch ability. So I think that he will find a way to get it done against Miami with everything on the line. And then I think it's going to come down to, that Colts and Texans game. It's a coin flip game. It's a 1-point spread. Basically, the bookmakers are telling you it's literally a coin flip. There's no real favorite in this game.
The Texans have had the Colts number for many years, however. Houston has had the Colts number for many years. And I think
my gut tells me that the Texans are going to win this game and that CJ Stroud's going to have a performance that's going to win this game. That's what my gut tells me. But the game is in Indianapolis, which makes a difference. And the Colts have been getting no respect all season long. They keep winning. They've held control of their own destiny for a wild card spot for weeks now. For weeks and weeks, they've been in the wild card spot with control. And yet every week, they're either barely favored or they're underdogs or they're, 2-point favorites at home. They're getting no respect from the bookmakers, from the general NFL public, or anybody. So they can kind of put their exclamation point on it and have their told you so, rather than all the doubters being like, see, the Colts were frauds all season long. So that's an awesome game that they picked for Saturday night.
It's a fantastic game. I can't wait to watch it. I also don't count out Vrabel at home ruining the Jags season, says David. I mean, it's a scenario, and it's another storyline that just kind of feeds into all this playoff hype. This is like one of my favorite weeks because of the playoff scenarios. Josh, I see your comment about Nico Collins and Des Bryant, what Des Bryant said about Nico Collins. Stick around, and I'm going to put that up on the screen at the end. When it's relevant here. Well, you know what? We're talking about Texans. Let's do it. Nico Collins talk from preseason. Not too bad to take. Look, fourth and flex were all over Nico Collins. They were pumping him up as they flexed through the preseason. They could not stop talking about Nico Collins. Congratulations. Yes, absolutely fourth and flex. Nico Collins shows up. We did interview Des Bryant. I interviewed him. Josh interviewed him. A few other people at the Expo interviewed him. Josh asked Des Bryant about Nico Collins. Des said who, but Des knows who he is now. I promise you that.
I love Des. I really do love Des.
He was fun. He blew my mind. I couldn't believe how down to earth what he was. He really was a super cool guy. I am a Des fan after meeting him and interviewing him at the Expo for sure. You can find that interview on the Fantasy Sports Corporation Network under the Expo series. As far as the AFC, you gave your take on the AFC. I also cannot wait for this Houston-Indianapolis game. I think that winner is probably the one that gets that 7 spot. Pittsburgh is obviously who I want to get in. I really like, they're my team. But as Pittsburgh fans, we can all agree across the Steelers nation that we're not built for a Super Bowl run. We're not built for a playoff run. We're built for a spoiler session, and we might ruin somebody's hopes in the wild card round, and that'd probably be about it. There is a ton of talent in the AFC, and that's deservedly so. It's not me crapping on my Steelers. It's not me not being a fan. It's just me being realistic to the game of football and what it is. I love my Steelers. Love to see them get in. I'm just happy to have broke that 500 mark again. And it's not being satisfied with mediocrity, but you take what you can get. David is so hyped for this weekend's games. He's stuck Sunday at a 1-year-old birthday party. They all know he's going to have his phone sitting in the corner watching the games. Honestly, his 1-year-old birthday party. The kid doesn't care. Put the games on TV. I've done 1-year-old birthday parties at breweries before. Not mine, but I have been there, and the mentality makes sense. The kid doesn't care. So, 1-year-old birthday parties about the adults and seeing your kid with cake smashed in their face. That's the editorial on 1-year-old birthdays. Let's go to the NFC playoff picture because we got a lot of talk about it. In the NFC, all right, the NFC, we got 1 spot left. I mean, that's basically how it shapes up. There's 1 spot left in the NFC. San Francisco is in. Dallas is in. Will they win it? We'll find out. Detroit is in. Tampa is on the fence. Okay, we're going to get the Tampa scenario. They currently lead their division. They're going to have to beat Carolina. It's a nice matchup, but we saw what happened last week. Philly is in. The Rams are in. So that leaves 1 spot because the 4 spot is filled. We just don't know by who. And we got the 7th spot, which Green Bay currently sits in. There are quite a lot of scenarios. Let's start at the bottom. Minnesota still has an outside chance. They have 7 wins. All the other contenders have 8. So if the losses played out right, you had the right ties, all that stuff. I'm not going to get into it. There's a whole paragraph if you want to look it up online of how Minnesota get in. Minnesota could get in. Technically, they play Detroit in the morning slate, early afternoon slate. And so we will find out if they have any outside shot during the morning games. Also in the morning slate will be Atlanta and New Orleans. All right, Atlanta and New Orleans. Atlanta still technically not out with the 7 wins, okay? But again, a lot has to happen across for Atlanta to get in. First of all, they would have to beat the Saints in New Orleans, which is doable, which would knock the Saints out. It would put Atlanta above the Saints. But again, a lot would have to happen for them to get that 7th spot. Green Bay would have to lose. Seattle would have to lose.
Well, yeah, but that's for the 7th spot. But they can still win that division too, right?
I mean,
can't they still win that division? If Tampa loses to Carolina, I believe the winner of the Saints Falcons game is the division champion.
Yeah, Atlanta, they clinched the title with a win over the Saints and a Tampa Buccaneers loss to Carolina. So again,
Yeah.
it could
So like
happen.
Atlanta's not going to
Like
get a
they're still
wild
playing.
card, but if they beat the Saints, all they need is the Bucks to lose.
There
So
you go.
they are very alive for the division. They are Bryce Young fans, is what they are.
They absolutely are. We had a lot of talk about Tampa in the thread. Uh, Let's see. I laughed. I did. I admit it. I laughed at Josh when he said Mayfield was going to be a top 15. He still could get knocked out of it, I think. But anyway, I did. Baker Mayfield showed up again at the right time, although last week did not look good. Josh is a Buccaneers fan. He says if they don't beat the Panthers, they don't deserve it. And deserve it or not, they won't get in if they lose
Yeah.
to the Panthers, pretty much for the most part. And David had
Well,
them
look, I
taking
mean,
the
like if
division
we want
since
to
the
talk
preseason.
Baker Mayfield, like it's very interesting for Baker because he's exceeded most people's expectations this year, like for sure, like no doubt about it. Played better than most expected him to play, but it literally all comes down to this game. If he loses to Carolina, everybody will say, see, Baker Mayfield still sucks. He's still not a legitimate starting quarterback. He's
It's
a
true.
bum. They never should have gave him the shot, this, that, and whatever. If he wins this game against Carolina and gets to the playoffs, it really solidifies his year that he exceeded expectations. He was better than most thought. He really played well for most of this entire season.
Yeah, he
Hasn't
did.
necessarily been lighting up the stat sheet, but he's been solid. He's cut down on the mistakes that were kind of a staple of what were causing him issues previously. And if he
Agreed.
wins this game again, everybody can finally say, wow, Baker, good year.
Yeah. Baker Mayfield, QB9 right now in your fantasy world. Almost he should be one of those guys that eclipses that 4,000 yard mark this season. He's only he's less than 100 yards. Excuse me, less than 100 yards away from it, so he shall most likely get there. Baker Mayfield sitting on 28 touchdowns, which is right up there at the top. Within the top 10 as well. Just honestly well done for Baker Mayfield to come in there. I was not a believer. He did give them a chance. How much of a chance we will see? Only 10 interceptions, 28 touchdowns on 10 interceptions. That is a stat line that you want from your starting quarterback and from a team that might, is trying to make a playoff run. They're straightforward playoff road. If they win, they get the title. As long as they don't lose and the Seahawks and the Packers lose, then they still get in. Let's talk about that. Tampa and Carolina will also play in that early morning slate. Seattle will face off against Arizona. Arizona playing spoiler to everybody right now, helping out the Cowboys in with taking down Philly. So we know Arizona can absolutely win this game. Seattle not at the top of their game right now. This is going to be a barn burner. It's going to come down to the end, and it's going to mean something. Seattle Seahawks, they clinch a berth if they win and the Packers lose or tie. So as long as they win and the Packers don't, then Seattle will get in. Otherwise, you get into all these ties and other teams need to lose and all that kind of stuff. Just like most of these teams, Seattle needs to win. That's what they got to do. And unfortunately, it's not going to be an easy win in Arizona.
No, I mean, Arizona's kind of shown all year that they can be feisty. I mean, like, of course, they beat the Eagles last week. Remember, they beat the Cowboys earlier in the season, and they've been competitive in a lot of their games this year. I mean, props to Jonathan Gannon. He's done a great job in his first year as the head coach of that team, getting them ready to play every week, to compete. It's been kind of a lost season for them, but, for players to still show up and compete every week despite a lost season, and I think his guys knew how much he wanted to beat Philly too, right? Leaving from Philly, that's a comeback game for him, and he inspired them to play. So yeah, not going to be easy for Seattle. And again, like even if they win it, they still need help too,
Yeah, no, they do. David, also a fellow Steelers fan. He loves his Steelers nation. He thinks that they can make it. Anyone can win. That's why they play the games. I'm just saying that's how it feels like they are set up. And David also loves that the Rams are in and hopes that Green Bay holds on as well. It would be a fun story if
the Rams can make some noise in the playoffs. The Rams can be a sneaky, make some noise team in the playoffs. Right now, the matchup would be Rams at Detroit if everything kind of holds the way it is. And how cool of a matchup is that?
That's a
The
fantastic one.
scriptwriters love it too because Stafford gets
they
to go
do.
back to Detroit for a playoff game. So scriptwriters win again.
I'm telling you. Green Bay, you brought up Green Bay. Green Bay, if they beat Chicago, they're in. Again, it's win and you're in. They clinch the berth if they can beat the Bears. Those division matchups, there's so many of them this week, and that is set up on purpose. That is 100% scripted to have all these division matchups. If they win, they're in. If not, a bunch of tie, loss, all these crazy scenarios. I mean, there's a lot of them. Green Bay's just got to get it done. We talked about in the preseason, could they do it again? Could lightning strike for a third time in Green Bay? We're not calling Love a Hall of Famer yet. But for, the first full season in and stuff, again, ups, downs, but, QB5 in the fantasy world, and he's got him in playoff contention. You can't take that away from him without a running game.
Yeah,
really.
and it's the golden situation you want. Like in this week, if you're not clinched, what you want is to be a winning in. You don't want to be the Seattle Seahawks right now where you have to win and that might not be good enough. You don't want to be the Steelers right now where you might win this week and it still might not be good enough. The Packers have that situation. And, we kind of went through a lot of crazy situations in the NFC for how these playoffs could all shake out. But as we run them down, I kind of just think the NFC is going to end very simply this week, and that the Packers are going to beat the Bears, despite the Bears very quietly playing very well lately. It's not just Fields.
Has really helped a lot for them.
Yeah, their defense has played great. Fields is playing great. There's a lot of things going well for the Bears right now, so that's not just a gimme matchup for the Packers. They're going to have to play good football to win that game. I think that they will. And then that kind of ends all those other wild card scenarios as long as the Packers win because they're the winning in team. And then the only other spot up for grabs, I think Baker is going to beat the Panthers, but that NFC South spot's really the only other one in the air right now.
Well, and as I'm gonna run through this just for everybody right now, but you talk about the Pittsburgh-Baltimore game, the Houston-Indianapolis game being on Saturday. Those are the games that will set some stuff up, but they don't decide anything. And so the NFL very deliberate on how they schedule these games.
Well, no, the Saturday night, though, it does decide something. Whoever wins that Texans-Colts game is in. The other one's not necessarily out. They're probably out, but that is a playing game. The winner is going to the playoffs.
Okay, I give you that. I will. So, you have a little drama there, but it's just for the 7th seed, I guess. So it's not like for the big ticket one that everybody's kind of looking at. But I give you that. I give you that. It does decide something. So they're going to give you a little something on Saturday. All the other games that decide stuff, the Chicago-Green Bay game, the Philly Giants game, the Dallas-Washington game, of course, the Buffalo-Miami game, all those games come in the afternoon slate, whereas the Tampa Carolina game and the Jacksonville Tennessee game, those are going to be your morning games. So those are the ones the NFL wants you to watch in the morning. Jacksonville at Tennessee, Tampa at Carolina. So those will decide something. It's just everything else will get wrapped up in the afternoon. So again, very strategic. How they lay this out. Again, intentional. We saw, if you were watching this weekend, as they were talking about who was in, who was still going to play, all the times were not set for the games. They said the NFL will determine those throughout the week. Obviously, those have been determined, and that's what you have. So afternoon, very busy. Chicago at Green Bay. Again, Green Bay wins, and they are in. Philly at New York. Philly needs to win that game to stay in contention for the title, but Dallas will also be playing Washington at the exact same time, and if Dallas can win, they take the title. Philly drops down. So it's a win. You get the title.
Better. They better.
And odds are in their favor. We talked about this at the beginning of the season. Nobody has won the NFC East 2 years in a row for almost 20 years. And so this, Philly trying to be the first one to do it in a long time. Dallas trying to keep the streak or lack thereof alive. And then, of course, we get Buffalo and Miami for the night game. What a way to end the season. Lots of playoff stuff. Who do you guys think is going to make it? David said he's about to sleep till the weekend. So excited. He's just going to rest up so he can stay up the entire time and just be jazzed up about it. I'm excited for this weekend. Adam, I know you're excited for this weekend. Are you not, sir?
Oh, I mean, I'm super amped up for this weekend. And, we talk about this a lot, and it's why the NFL is so special and so awesome, how every week matters so much. And every year in the NFL, when we get down to this last week of the season, there's always a ton of scenarios like you ran through right there. The last
Yeah.
week of the season always has many teams unclinched, many scenarios for different teams that could get in, a lot of teams competing for those last spots. It's what makes the NFL so fun. But I guess we shouldn't be surprised because the scriptwriters wouldn't have it any other way. This week
They
has
sure
to
as hell
matter.
wouldn't. Not that it's scripted, but I mean, it does play out. I mean, we're good. We can find the storylines where they need to be. For instance, here's one here. Boom. Travis Kelce needs 16 yards to reach 1,000. He'll get it. Rashid Rice needs 62 yards to reach 1,000. I think he'll get that. And Pacheco needs 65 yards to reach 1,000 rushing yards. I think he could get that too. I really think all these are achievable, Adam.
Well, all those are achievable, but let's remember too that the Chiefs don't have anything to play for this week. They are locked into the 3 seed. They're the 3 seed. They can't move up and they can't move down. They're number 3 no matter what happens this week. So they might rest some guys.
I'm sure the players want to play. I'll bet, these are pretty basic contract incentives that are built into the contract. So I think they'll have Kelce in for a play. He'll catch his 16 yards on that first catch.
And then his day will be over.
His day will be over. Rashid Rice, he's probably going to, catch a couple and then his day will be over. Pacheco, he's probably the least likely of any of these guys. And I think he'll probably get it, but he would be the one in the most danger of not getting played because he is a running back, more prone to injury.
And because he's been banged up lately too. He's dealing with some injury stuff. He was questionable this week. They might want to give him the week off to really get him ready for next week.
Coaches are pretty good about giving guys their shots to hit their big money incentives. So they're not trying to take money out of people's pockets, especially when they've done that much work to earn it. So we'll see about that one. Some other things just to wrap up everything up. Here is a fantasy championship roster that we found. You see the names on there: C.J. Stroud, Pacheco, White, Lamb. And St. Brown, I think, are the big names on there that I expect to see there. I don't know if I expected to see Stroud on a championship roster, but there he is. Likely nice pickup for that one. Nakua, what a surprise this season. Aubrey, perfect on the season so far. Would love to see him finish that out. They might not even give him a kick. They may just say go for it so Aubrey can keep it straight. I don't know.
Look, I mean, this roster right here, I think, is a perfect example of how important the waiver wire is, right?
That's what
C.J. Stroud, Zamir White, Isaiah Likely, Puka Nakua were all guys who probably were not drafted this year that he added from the waiver wire, and they're in his starting lineup for the last week of the season.
Absolutely. David, you son of a bitch. You son of a bitch. Yes, David's also excited for Monday when Big Blue plays for the national championship. Hooray! So excited.
Go Huskies!
Go Huskies! Jeez. I actually do have a little invested in the Huskies and the fact that Penix Jr. used to be Indiana's quarterback, and that is my wife's alma mater. Here is another one from Draft Day Dice. This is how it played out. Patrick Mahomes is your winning team there. Sorry that didn't come out better. But Patrick Mahomes is your winning side. So in the championship game, a lot of names here that I would expect to be here. We got Goff, Mahomes, we got Gibbs, nice waiver wire pickup, I'm sure. McCaffrey, of course, is there. D-Hop on the winning team. Aubrey there again. Interesting.
Hey, wait, so kickers matter, huh? Kickers do matter in fantasy. Both these guys have Aubrey. Both these guys won a championship. Target those kickers, right?
I'm telling you, I don't understand why people want them out there. The highest scoring players every single season. It's not even close, and people don't want to have kickers in. Whichever, I'm okay. And we got one more for you. Oh, my God, it's our own Adam Hulse. Pulls out the win with 0.8. I couldn't believe it. This is the league that we run. Adam joined in first time in, wins the whole thing against Nat's amazing team. Nat's won a couple championships. I'm in a couple leagues with her. She's was in contention for a lot of them. You see, she was first on the season. She's a waiver wire monster. Let me tell you, this league, you only get 3 waiver wire pickups every week. I handicap people with that on purpose, and she used them all. In other leagues, I mean, she was making 8, 7, 8, 9 waiver wire pickups every week. She's a waiver wire monster, and she finished first in those leagues as well. Didn't get all the championships, but she definitely took home some cash. But Adam, congratulations on this one. Comes from the 3rd spot. You actually beat my wife. And then
I did.
to make the championship game, beat my wife in the semifinals, and then here we are, owner of Lamar Jackson. Did you draft Lamar? I have to think that you did.
I sure did.
Yeah. How
Drafted
much of your
Lamar.
roster made it?
The Rashi Rice was a nice pickup. I had Shaheed in there, even though he didn't do anything. You can see Zamir, you could see Likely. So those waiver wire additions again made a difference for me. I just thought that winning this championship was look. I mean, obviously, I took Justin Jefferson with my first overall pick, right?
Absolutely.
And he goes down for a big chunk in the middle of the year, and my team was kind of reeling when that happened. I was in
Probably why
first
you
before
finished
he
third.
got injured. Then I struggled a lot after he got injured. So for him to come back for the championship, and here was the situation in this game. Going into that Sunday night game, the final game of the week, I was trailing by 5 points.
Yes.
I had Jefferson and she had Addison. So that's like literally like a coin flip situation there. So to pull it out by 0.8 with Jefferson after I was missing him in the middle of the year feels pretty good that it worked out that way.
And I want the receiver in that situation every single time. Unless it's CMC, I want the receiver in that situation. When it's especially a Jefferson versus Addison, I definitely want that. You were in trouble. You're going against that Prescott Lamb stack. Obviously, Lamb goes for 47. You had to be feeling like kind of crappy after that. I mean, you were happy for the Cowboys, obviously, but from this league's view right
now, that was a bittersweet situation for me because my fandom loved everything about what CeeDee Lamb did. But knowing I was also facing him in fantasy, and by the way, this was not the only league that I was facing CeeDee Lamb in either. So, I wasn't sure how to feel about it because obviously I loved what he did, but it kind of hurt me. Thankfully, I was able to overcome this one. In the other league championship that I played against CeeDee, I was not able to overcome it. So there you go.
By 0.8, congratulations, my friend. Nat actually picked right after me. I was 9th, she was 10th. It's all bullshit. But congratulations on the win there. Your trophy is on the way, and your bragging rights last all year long. That's it for this week. Again, next week, you will want to be here. We are going to change the way you play fantasy football. We're going to break down the entire NFL season, stat line by stat line. These are not the stats you can just find anywhere. We're breaking down the stuff, who made the top 10s, who scored over 15 points consistently. We're just going to get deep into these stats. We're going to show you the stats that all the big league players look at, all the guys that make the big money, like Adam Hulse here. These are the stats that they get into. We're going to show them all to you next week. Get into it all. It's going to be fun. We're going to talk about how the playoff picture looks, and of course we're going to talk about how we predicted the entire season before it ever started. We went through every team game by game. We told you exactly how it was going to play out, and we did pretty dang good. Catch all of it next week. Again, change the way you play fantasy football. Go check out all the great NFL content from my co-host, Adam Hulse. Adam Hulse stuff can be found on Sportskeeda. That's Keeta with a K. Type the / in there, Adam Hulse. You can hit him up for any questions you got at Adam Hulse Sports. He is everywhere. He's all over at Adam. One last week to go. One last week in the NFL season, and then we hit the playoffs. A lot of meaningless games, but the most meaningful games happen this week.
Oh, yeah, one more week in the regular season, but not one more week for us. We're going to keep this thing going right through the playoffs, so I hope everybody comes back. We got a lot more stuff to talk about.
100%. Make sure you don't miss it. Thank you for joining us. Thanks to Josh. Thanks to David. Thanks for everybody that joined us and threw some comments in. Hit the like, hit the follow, hit the subscribe, all that social media stuff. We love you guys. We hope you stay safe. Enjoy the absolute amazing football slate we have this weekend. Come back and talk with us about it next week, Tuesday, 9:30 a.m. It's that EFIN morning after show right here. I am Chris Fox for my co-host, Adam Hulse. We'll see you guys next week. And we'll even play an outro.